Hello everyone. I wanted to come back to this and show you how you sew the two halves of your block together. You'll notice you've got a wedge going off this way and a wedge coming off this way, but you've got this nice long seam across the center. That's what we're going to sew first. So what you do is you bring these two halves of the block right sides together, and then use a positioning pin. Oh, and by the way, in case you haven't yet, all those dog ears that form at the center of your block, you can cut those off, even with the seam allowance. Anyway, back to this, and I'm going to bring the camera in just a bit so you can see better. What I want to do is use a positioning pin right here in the center. I want to look at this right here in the center of the block. I had it better the first time. Let me put it down. Get that. And then I'm going to match it right there with that center. Now, because these seams are all pressed in one direction, they're going to nest together there in the middle. So I want to straighten that up a little bit. I want to make sure that's straight. And I'm going to put a pin right here. And I'm going to go ahead and put a pin right here. And then I'm going to put a positioning pin in here. Yes. And I might this time go ahead to the end. And you know what I forgot to do, but I can do it now. I've got to pin that seam allowance out of the way. This should feel very familiar because it is exactly the way you sewed together the other units. Let me make sure I did that. Yep, that's good. It's exactly the way you sewed together the other units. Nothing's different here. It's just that you get to do two of them at the same time. So we're sewing these diamonds on one side of the center together. First pinning, then sewing. I want to pin these as well. Now here I need to move this seam allowance out of the way, right there. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead this time and put my positioning pin in. Let me see here if I can do that right there at the end of that seam. I'm going to find the magic spot on the other side. I almost got it. There's my point to match. I'm going to line this pin up so that it's straight up and down. Throw in a pin. And then match these points. Nope, see, that's off a little bit. And that's why you want to be sure and check both sides. Both sides of your positioning pin. You can trust the paper up to a point, but sometimes the paper wiggles a little bit. And what happens here when I'm lining this up, there will be, you know, it's like there will be a little bit of extra, just the tiniest little bit on the bottom, but as you sew it, it'll work itself out. So don't worry about that. I'm going to put a pin here, double check the back. See, it's off just the tiniest little bit as well. So I'm going to fix it. Oops, I got to make sure I'm in the right spot to fix it. Now, what if I had sewn that without fixing it? Whoops, there's the doorbell. If I had sewn it without fixing it, it would have been off, but not by a huge amount. So, what I'm going to do, oh, that was the UPS man at the door, and he's gone, so I don't have to turn the camera off. What I will do is take this to the sewing machine and sew this long straight seam, back stitching at both ends, and then I'll connect the side of the wedge to the edge of the diamond on each side, just the way you did when you put the rest of the block together, and it's done. Remove the freezer paper in the seam allowance. I'm sorry, not the freezer paper, the vellum, the paper. Remove it from the seam allowances, press all of the seam allowances in a circular rotation following those arrows, and then you'll remove the paper from the block and set the round block into the corners. And I will talk about both of those things in another video, and they're in your instructions as well. So, happy sewing!